start with the Ravens offense against the Steelers defense. I think it's going to be one of the most fun matchups of the entire weekend, really of the entire season. It's a huge division game where the Ravens realistically might not win the division, though I still feel like just the way the rest of the season looks, they should be able to close that gap and jump the Steelers. Lamar Jackson just playing at an absurd level, Tage. I think that it's unfortunate that you have the Josh Allen season and the narrative there because Lamar is playing better than his MVP season. He's showing more. He has been able to do this, but now he's just doing it at an even higher level where you're playing under center, you're playing in those play action situations. It's the usual extending play stuff, but also continuing to find open receivers and really create open receivers with the way he moves around, with how much, like, he has so much gravity as a quarterback because he can just run through an entire defense through scrambling. So defense has to pay attention. They have to morph their coverages in terms of how you can't play as much man coverage. You're going to have to play zone just to keep eyes on the quarterback in different ways. So he has continued to elevate this offense. It's so much fun to watch a literal multiple time MVP continue to elevate his game. It is really, really a gift to be able to have that. I'm really glad that Monken and Jackson together got another year. What do you have here for the Ravens offense?
I agree with so much of what you said there, where this Ravens dropback game is really lethal for opposing defenses. Lamar Jackson has been the most productive quarterback in the league this year in expected dropback situations. So when the chance of dropping back is 70% or higher, he's the quarterback that has generated the most positive EPA on those plays. And when you look at the gravity that he has, that you talked about, where it's like, even in expected dropback situations, like, he's still a threat to have a designed run, to scramble. That changes how defenses has to play them, and that's what makes it so tough for the defenses to defend the Ravens. And then the other thing I think that the Ravens are doing really well right now with Monken as a play caller is just like the personnel diversity that we've talked about throughout this year. The Bills are doing a great job of it. The Ravens are also doing a great job of it. They run 12 personnel almost as much as they run 11. So they love to get their two tight ends and Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely out on the field. And they also run a lot of two back sets where they can get both Derrick Henry and Patrick Ricard out on the field, or just kind of have even two running back, two tight end sets out there. And so they just make you prepare for so much as a defense, and that definitely makes it tougher to defend. Now, granted, in this game, the Steelers have been one of two teams to generate a negative EPA for the Ravens offense this year. They've only had two games where they've had a below average performance, week 2 against the Raiders and then week 11 against the Steelers. And so that's what's going to make this matchup really fun to watch.
That week 2 Raiders game, I love when you look back at a season and just have this like awesome team. And it's just like one game where it's like, what happened here? It's just obviously a reminder in the NFL. It is so hard to just have the ball bounce in your favor for 17 games plus the playoffs so often. Like, you're going to have a game that you just have something happen where it falls away from you. And, we got to make sure we take that into account when we're looking at team strength overall. You mentioned that Steelers game against the Ravens, that as being a negative Ravens offense EPA game. The Steelers are able to create a bunch of turnovers in that game. So I think that's going to be something we certainly monitor. For a Steelers defense, they're a hyper talented unit up front. You get Hayward and Watt and Highsmith and Benton. They're happy to just rush for play zone coverage behind it. They want to be in single high defenses. You're going to see a lot of kind of standard, kind of regulated cover 3. You mix in some cover 2 as well. They do what they do. Like, they are good at it because of their front, but it's not the most complicated coverage scheme on the back end. I think part of the reason why the Eagles pass game against the Steelers, and we'll talk about the Eagles later, looked a little bit better in the game against them is because you have those regulated type looks on the defensive end. What do you have here for the Steelers defense?
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers defense has played well, pretty much wire to wire this season. They're eighth in EPA per play allowed. They're good against both the pass and the run. And you mentioned all their defensive line talent, and that's really what is driving this defense forward. Where Cam Hayward is having, probably the best pass rusher season from a defensive tackle, this year. And so, he's played very high level. TJ Watt is obviously getting his sacks at a high rate, to really just generate negative plays against the offense. And then Nick Herbig and Alex Highsmith in smaller sample are just like getting pressure at a high rate. And then on top of that, you have linebacker play behind this front four that is also pretty good. And so just a very sound defense. Very fun to watch. Like they don't do a ton of crazy stuff schematically because they have the players, especially in the front seven, that can just do a good job of putting pressure on opposing offenses.
Cam Hayward, like sneaky, like kind of half, like it could be, it might not be. Just like super sneaky defense player of the year. Do I think he's going to win it? Probably not. Do I think that he is certainly someone who has had a fantastic year? I really, really do. Like you mentioned, it's so fun to watch those guys up front. Like some of the ways that the Eagles want to run counter where, the backside defender has to get cut off by a tight end. It's a tough block. You just can't do that against the Steelers. Like they can, like things that you draw up on a chalkboard, they just totally remove overall. So a really, really fun unit to watch overall. Thinking about it from a positive matchup for the Ravens offense. Obviously, in every game, you want to avoid turnovers. You're hoping that you don't have that just absurd interception that the Steelers had in that previous game. You're hoping that Derrick Henry isn't fumbling, which is obviously a rare occasion overall. What do you have as just a positive matchup for the Ravens offense here?
Yeah, I think a very interesting matchup to watch in this game that's going to be good for the Ravens offense is when the Steelers don't blitz. Like Lamar Jackson has just been insane when not blitz this season. He has the best EPA per dropback of any quarterback in the league. The Steelers have been better when blitzing versus when not blitzing, and so that's something that they should definitely take into account. But there will be a lot of situations obviously where they don't blitz, and Lamar should be able to take advantage of that. And the receivers he likes to find when he is not blitzed is Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. They have the two highest target shares, and they're both very productive when getting thrown to when Lamar's not blitzed.
Flipping it over for a positive matchup, or maybe a positive matchup for the Steelers defense. I'm really interested to see what their plan is for the Ravens run game overall. They were able to kind of wipe out the Eagles run game, where when I'm watching it on a down to down basis, it's not this massive kind of schematic choice. It is just beating a guy one on one here and there, where if you're able to get that kind of splash play run stop on an early down, you can force the team into some of those third and pass situations. You're able to make the offense maybe a little bit more predictable. You're able to get your 4-man pass rush just going. And I think in the game against the Ravens, what they did was they had, and it wasn't a ton of Lamar Jackson design kind of read type plays, but you have your defensive end hanging out instead of kind of targeting the running back and attacking. So you're forcing Lamar Jackson to hand the ball off inside. And you're saying, look, we're comfortable with the other guys on the inside. We're going to be able to stop the run with those guys. We don't have to chase it with the defensive end, loop a linebacker around to get Lamar Jackson, because on those read type plays, you can prioritize and push the offense into a give or into a keep based on who you want to be the ball carrier. So I think I'm interested to see just what happens there overall. I'm not sure if it'll be a positive for the Steelers. It feels like Steelers run defense can just kind of handle every every single team. What do you have here as a positive matchup for the Steelers defense?
Yeah, I really like the one that you pointed out there, and the one that I found digging through the data was when the Ravens come out in 21 personnel, so two backs, one tight end. I think the Steelers will probably have the advantage here. So the Ravens use two backs on 19% of plays, which is third highest in the league. The Steelers haven't seen like a ton of 21 personnel, but when they have seen it, they've destroyed it. They've only allowed a 31% success rate. They saw it 11 times against Baltimore in their week 11 matchup and only allowed two successful plays out of those 11. And then against other teams this season too, like Atlanta and Denver and the Chargers, they've also done a really good job of shutting down 21 personnel plays. So they definitely have the linebackers, to match up when you have those bigger bodies on the field and multiple backs on the field. And so I think that the Steelers should continue to do a pretty good job of that in this game.
I really want to see what Monken's plan overall is going to be in the run game, obviously in the pass game as well. I just look at when I watched that film against the Steelers from that first matchup, and you just think about it overall, like those three turnovers, it's just such a big deal in a one game sample. You're like, how much are you projecting that forward? How much can you say, oh, like the Ravens will be able to avoid turnovers? But I think something just like fun to watch for me here is going to be what is the Steelers' plan to create some of those turnovers? Are you able to have some sort of splash play that can really, really change the game? And I mean, Tej, we do these previews for games all the time. I always hate to do the stay healthy or avoid turnovers kind of type things, but it feels like where the Ravens were decent from like a rushing success rate, particularly on early downs against the Steelers in that first game. Actually, I think more than decent, if I remember correctly. But if you're turning the ball over, it really doesn't matter at times. What do you have here just kind of as a fun matchup that you're looking for the Ravens offense?
Yeah, something specific in this game that I think will be pretty fun to watch is when Lamar is pressured. Like you have these really elite pass rushers from the Steelers. Like T.J. Watt in particular is especially good at converting his pressures into sacks. He's been better at that than anyone else in the league for the past couple seasons now. But Lamar is so elusive when pressured, as we've seen so many times. And so I think that'll just be really fun to watch him try to escape some of the pass rushing lanes that the Steelers pass rushers are coming through, and kind of like what his moves are to get away from them in this game.
I love it. I feel like we've used that for a few times when we're previewing the Ravens because it's such a fun thing. Again, I think it's so important that Lamar is continuing and has been very good at this for a long time, but now is continuing to improve on just the regular capital Q kind of quarterbacking stuff because the play extension is so good. So watching him extend and play to push the ball down the field as well is really, really cool. For me, just a fun matchup. It takes every single tackle in this game, I think is going to be fun. And it's the Ravens, Steelers, old school kind of stuff, but also just looking at those backs, looking at some of those guys on the defense, it feels like every single run play is going to be an absolute fight. Where, of course, yeah, it is for every single team, but particularly with this Ravens offensive line, where I think they've had their ups, they've had their downs. I think maybe they're swinging up a little bit more than what when we had talked about them the last time. So I think they can be positive in some of those situations. But man, that front four for Pittsburgh is just so much. You have any kind of fun matchup for the Steelers defense here?
Yeah, I have a very similar one to you, yeah, where with respect to tackling, where like Deshaun Elliott, I think is one of the better tacklers in the league. Like it's always so much fun to watch how physical he is, when tackling, when run fitting. And Terrell Austin, Steelers defensive coordinator, was doing his press conference earlier today, and he was talking about how the Steelers missed the physicality last week, without him not there. And he mentioned Elliott in particular as someone who's having a quietly outstanding season. And so if he does end up playing in this game, because he missed last week due to injury, I think it'll just be so much fun to watch him tackle Derrick Henry and Lamar.
Certainly an injury that to monitor. Just thinking about them overall. Moving on here to the Steelers offense versus the Ravens defense. Another injury that you really have to monitor there is George Pickens. Without him, it really feels like it unfolds things a bit. The offense for Pittsburgh kind of had no chance going against the Eagles defense. The Steelers, they want to they want to condense their kind of standard in the run game, running a lot of zone toss, which you just see how it feels kind of between the personnel overall. They've gotten good play from Zach Frazier at center. The Darnell Washington snaps are really, really fun. And like Russ shows you things at times where it's like, oh, okay, like that's a little bit of just not a new thing for Russ, but an added thing for this season. So I hope Pickens is back just because it opens things up in so many ways. What do you have here for the Steelers offense?
I'm with you on Pickens, where I don't think he's like the best receiver in the league, but I think he's so important to the Steelers offense because the drop off from him to their other receiving options is just like it's a massive drop off. Especially compared to some other situations around the NFL. And so in games where both Russell Wilson is the starting quarterback and George Pickens is playing, the Steelers are 11th in EPA per dropback and 18th in dropback success rate. So you see the difference there, showing that they're very explosive when Russell Wilson and George Pickens are both playing, and generally successful on a down to down basis. But in the two games without Pickens, they've had a 36% success rate, when dropping back. And that just goes to show, like, both the Browns and the Eagles were able to defend the Steelers offense much better than how they were performing beforehand. So like you just see this big delta between Pickens and the rest of the Steelers receiving options, and so that's significant. If they end up getting him back in this game, and then just like looking around the other areas of the offense, the Steelers will probably run a lot of zone. Because Arthur Smith loves to call inside zone, outside zone, and they'll also probably use play action at a high rate. Since that's what they've been doing since Russell Wilson has gotten into the starting lineup. And what I'm very curious to hear from your perspective is with how the Steelers pair their play action behind a lot of zone runs. Is there certain run concepts to you that are like easier to sell play action behind?
To me, it is always, are you actually selling a run that like you have in your playbook that you are going to use? So you'll see some teams, maybe not as much this year, but if you're like every time it's kind of a gap scheme play action, it's a play action. They're only a zone team. And so defenses can kind of cue in on that bit. I just like when teams have it sort of married together. Now you get a really just smart league at this point where any sort of kind of shotgun gun guard pull play action, that is so effective at pulling a linebacker in because your defense is usually a nickel that even if the linebacker's kind of a stack backer, they're going to feel that they're going to move and vacate space. So I think that offense overall have done such a good job in doing that. Again, I just like when your play fakes and your runs look the same in like a conceptual level. And I do think when I watch film across the league, Tage, if I think back just really a few years ago, seeing how linebackers deal with play action, it's so cool to watch linebackers evolve and see obviously the coaching for linebackers. And I think that really as teams understand, we cannot let this play action crosser just rip us apart kind of game after game, and seeing how linebackers are playing a little bit slower. You have kind of the backside linebacker hanging out just a little bit more, or you have defensive ends instead of just chasing the run, really like targeting the quarterback, because if that quarterback's going to boot out, they're going to be unblocked. So I really I like that question. I like that how teams have handled it a little bit, but I really like what linebackers have kind of evolved to as well. Speaking of the linebackers for the Ravens and really the Ravens defense overall, a bit of up and down. I think a unit that is happy when you run the ball. I think that the way that players have like overlap in zone coverage last year, where yeah, it really felt like they had 13 guys on the field in zone coverage at times because you have Roquan Smith covering so many spaces so easily, and just the way that they were able to manipulate things up front. So it still feels like a unit that in recent weeks, you get to settle in a little bit more. What do you have here for the Ravens defense?
Definitely agree with you that they've settled in a little bit. Weeks 1 through 8, they were 28th in EPA per dropback allowed. Since then, they're 12th in EPA per dropback allowed. So definitely getting a little bit better there. And one of the differences I think is they've just gotten better at defending throws. Outside the numbers instead of over the middle of the field. Like middle of the field defense is still something that they are very weak at. They just haven't gotten great play from their linebackers this season. Every safety except Kyle Hamilton has taken a bit of a step back, and so that's allowed teams to really have like good production over the middle of the field against them. But you still have some decent pass rushers. Matabike, Van Noy can still get pressure from time to time. They just if they want to be a better defense in the playoffs, they just really have to figure out how they're going to dedicate resources to defending the middle of the field.
I want to see if they continue. Just, are you able to defend well outside against the Steelers unit that is going to push the ball no matter what, no matter who is out there? I am interested, though, as well to see if the Steelers are magically able to attack the middle of the field where it feels like that's not what the priority is. It is a play action. We're going to throw the ball outside type unit. Do you have a matchup you feel maybe positive or just even intrigued about for the Steelers offense?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that like I'm gonna watch in this game is when the Steelers do throw over the middle of the field, which doesn't happen often. Like they probably will have the advantage in this game. Like Calvin Austin has been pretty productive over the middle of the field. Pat Fryermuth has also been pretty productive there as well, and they could even get the running backs involved on some shorter routes. But like George Pickens wants to win outside, like that's kind of their game. If Mike Williams gets involved, like he wants to do the same thing, and so it'll be like an interesting clash of what's like probably optimal for the Steelers versus like what they like to do and what they feel confident in.
The optimal versus what you like to do, that's always an interesting back and forth. Like when I think about the Steelers run game overall, it feels like you're a little bit limited by what you have in the pass game as well, just because against the Eagles you get a bunch of examples of running into really really kind of fronts that I think you just don't have a chance to get through, just the way that the Eagles load the box up in different ways. But if you can't get to some of your middle of the field attackers, you have just less ways to conflict the defense overall. Do you have a positive matchup here that you feel for the Ravens defense?
Yeah, I think Ravens defense will have the advantage in this game on zone runs, actually. So just talked about how the Steelers like to run a lot of outside zone and inside zone. That's kind of what Arthur Smith has in his bag. But the Ravens are the second best team in the league at defending those types of runs, as charted by our friends at FTN Data. And so that will be really interesting to watch in this game as well.
Looking forward to maybe a matchup that is just fun for you. I will say for me, it's just Darnell Washington when he's just blocking people. You get some examples, I will say, of the Eagles just moving him to the side, but the clip of him versus Slay, just kind of going everywhere. Yeah, a tough situation where the quarterback, like, what is a quarterback supposed to do in that situation? You've got no hope. It's tough. You're just kind of hoping to make it through there overall. So that's something I'm looking forward to. Do you have a fun matchup here for this part of the matchup?
Yeah, that clip of Darnell Washington was hilarious to see when it was making its rounds on Twitter. But yeah, fun matchup. Well, I think be like Pickens versus Hamilton. In on these deep balls where Kyle Hamilton is so good at covering area on the field. Like he'll probably be shaded towards Pickens' side a lot in this game. But like the Russell Wilson to George Pickens deep ball connection is really good. So that'll be a fun clash of strength on strength there.
Yeah, especially if Hamilton, like they're playing cover two to Pickens' side, they have a safety over the top. The ball's in the air. What's going to happen? It is always a fun situation for the Steelers. For me, I'm really excited about Travis Jones versus Zach Frazier, both players who I think have had a lot of positive on their tape this year on that inside part of the line. Just you have to find ways against teams that run zone to kind of mess with their double teams just a little bit between the center and the guard, between the center and the other guard. So that's another situation that is going to be a real fight on the inside, a real fight of the game that I'm excited to watch on Saturday.